My name is Dan White Jr., and we'll start now, but I'm a movement leader with the V3 movement, and we've been training women and men church planters for the last 12 years, I think, maybe 13 years now, through our cohorts and our immersions. And we love to host these webinars to equip you and to really kind of double click on a particular topic as a resource for you. And so today we are going to have one of my good friends, 10 years now, I think we've known each other, Scott, who is a church planter in San Antonio. He was asking me earlier, am I still a church planter 16 years later? Well, once you start something, you're just constantly starting other stuff. So you're still a church planter, Scott, and that's in San Antonio, the Park Church. And just recently, in the last 5 years, he started the 412 Project, which is really an equipping ministry that is helping small and mid-sized churches with strategy and support and back-end help. And so he brings a lot of intelligence around structure in a church plant. And I can't wait to get into it. We're going to talk about why structure in a church plant is important, but also why we have an allergy to it. In my own story, so I planted 16 years ago. I'd have to say I had a lot of allergy to structure. My framework for church planting was organic. But the more that I really actually understood organic is that you actually have to be very strategic and organized around creating organic crops. You don't just throw seed out and hope something happens. It's very intentional work to create organic works. And so that metaphor helped me understand that maybe I was kind of swinging the pendulum a little bit, as well as I was coming out of some real top-heavy, business-oriented leadership and structure, and having a hard time figuring out what things to bring with me, what things to leave behind, how to create an ethos and ecology that was less structured around the bottom line and commodifying people and turning leadership into providers and participants into consumers. I was really having a challenge kind of picking through the clutter of all that to create a healthier environment. And so I would say probably for the first 3 or 4 years of our church, we were in some pendulumitis, and it took some pain and some breakthrough to find our balance and center again, and warm ourselves up to structure. How do we structure something that will multiply and grow in healthy ways? And so this conversation is about that. It's about structure, ecclesiological structure, financial structure, leadership structure. Obviously, we can't hit everything super deep in this next 50 minutes, but I brought my friend in, Scott, because he has a really good relationship with structure, a lot of intelligence. And so, Scott, I want to ask you, why structure? Why strategy? Why do you care about this in a church plant? Sure, a little bit of like your background, what you've seen and what you're doing now, but I really want to know why this is something that you are passionate about.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. I think it's really fitting that you started with the term allergy. One, because I live on the edge of the Texas Hill Country and I'm allergic to almost everything here. But also, like you, and I mean, Dan and I, we have really similar stories, especially foundation stories of just,
Mm.
I'm still in many ways a recovering megachurch guy.
Mm.
I was the executive pastor in one of the largest churches in the country, and for a very like pretty solid season. I love that job and I felt fulfilled in it, and until like I didn't, and started searching for a different a different way to gather with a community of people, which led to us church
Mm,
planting um, and to all sorts of, adventures along the way of that. We planted it 16 years ago, a church that, like what you said, we were um, almost combative to structure early
mm,
it felt like the antithesis of the organic church, which that was the movement. It was 16 years ago we planted too.
yeah.
It was, emerging church, organic church. We'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I have been to Caneo Center and I've been to Puerto Rico. And I remember vividly you telling me that if we do not cut things down here, they will completely
Mm,
consume our entire facility. Like the jungle will grow
mm,
over us. So it's like one way of
mm-hmm,
thinking of the organic unkept space is actually could be complete and total chaos. Um,
mm,
so just one like really simple story early on, and
mm-hmm,
then I want to try to give a theological framework that I think has been helpful for me for a long time now. Um, Early on, we're going to be organic and we're going to let, just the Holy Spirit lead this community wherever we're going to go. And um, I will say we did want paychecks. So there was a sort of like organic also, but like we need a bank account. So those immediately can
mm,
sound like they're sort of anti to one another. But I remember going to lunch in the first 6 months of our church plant with a dear friend of mine, two dear friends of mine, a husband and a wife who had planted our church with us. And 16 years later, they're still a part of our church community,
mm,
and are still leaders in our church community, and still dear friends. And we went to lunch and she proposed that we, once a month, organize a lunch after church for our new young church plant community. And my response to my dear friend was, if people want to go to lunch, they can go to lunch on their own. I will not organize, plan, or program any aspect of this church community.
yeah.
She started crying. Um, and thankfully, my heart was softened. And I said, fine, if you want to do it, you can do it. Well, in the first 4 years of our church plant, probably the most successful thing that we did every month was lunch after church. And we all went out to
Mm,
have a meal together and we brought our little kids and they ran around crazy. And it was just a really important foundational part of who we are as a church community.
mm,
So it was one of those early on kind of thoughts of like, if we don't program and structure in some way, we're gonna miss out on even
mm,
living into the core values that we want to have in our church community. So, like if we
mm,
say like we're a church committed to being around the table with one another, but we don't have any way of inviting people to a table, any organized way
mm,
of putting people around a table, um, we are actually antithetical to the mission that we set ourselves to if there's nothing behind it.
mm.
The
Yes.
theological framework for me that I've worked on and thought through for a long time, really, it comes out of First Corinthians chapter 4, starting in verse 1. It's just that first verse, and it's something Paul said, and I hung on to this and I still hang on to this. He says that he wants to be regarded as a steward of the mystery of God. And I love the
Mm,
juxtaposition of these two words, a steward
mm-hmm,
of the mystery. And I've been thinking a lot about like as a pastor, that is actually the same calling that I want to have in my life. So the a steward, when you think steward, you think, I mean, in the Greek, it was like the household manager.
mm-hmm,
It's like the structurer. It's the making sure everything
mm-hmm,
goes the way it needs to go. And,
mm-hmm,
in a household, people get fed and bills get paid and all of these things that we sort of innately do. Most of us do in some form or fashion in our homes. But then on addition to that, you have this idea of like mystery and the mystery part of that, it implies that like we didn't make this. We can't
mm,
control the Holy Spirit. and the Spirit is the one actually moving, and we're just joining God in the renewal of what God is doing. But somehow or
Mm,
another, like, I think our whole vocation lives in that juxtaposition between structure and service of something we cannot engineer. So I
mm,
cannot make the Spirit move. I don't believe that, but I am in service to it, and there's a need for some structure around that. So that's why we take structure seriously. That's why we launched 412 Project a handful of years ago, so that we could work with churches, whether it's through like literally back office accounting and budget preparedness and planning, all the way up to strategic planning and leadership coaching. Um, but at the same time, we take structure seriously, but we also want to hold it loosely, right? So it's like you
mm,
plan and we pray, and we measure and we surrender. And we try to
mm,
fit that juxtaposition between that mystery and stewarding. And so just like a last thought is like I've been working on
mm,
my dissertation, and my big kind of idea for the dissertation is that the church was never meant to scale. Um, it was meant to multiply, and that
mm.
there are there are well-meaning people attempting to apply business principles to churches, but that's not where our structural foundations need to come from. Not from,
Okay.
you know, best practices and scaling a corporation. It needs to come from something rooted in the scripture and the history of the church. Uh,
Yes.
so yeah, so that's kind of, I mean, that's like a big
That's
idea
good,
and
Scott.
kind of where my
Yeah.
heart is at.
Yeah, that's helpful. You're poking at a tension that
Mm,
you're embracing. A lot of the things that you said there seem to be difficult for most people to let live together. They either move in one direction or the other.
mm.
Um, do you do you find that's um, hard to uh, is it hard for people to sit in that, like the culture of your church and the culture of what you do, that this is a both and space, not an either or? um, I'm sure some people are prone to wanting all organization and strategy in order to guarantee success, and other people might be allergic to that. And
Mm.
do you find that people struggle with that tension?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think V3 was the first time I was introduced to like the fivefold um,
Mm-hmm.
concept, the theogenetic coding,
Mm-hmm.
and having coached that with V3 with people. I think that's a great way to think about this, is that like you have somebody, oftentimes church planters, the ones that I coach a lot of times are like, they're high vision people. They're
Yeah, yeah.
apostolic and sometimes prophetic, I mean, there's all different kinds of mixes, right? But I think there are, and maybe even the fivefold doesn't quite get at this, but like you can't just set a vision out in front of people and not help them move towards the vision.
Yes.
So,
Right.
I mean, so I think sometimes I think
Mm.
people are adverse to structure, not because, not because they're inherently maybe have an allergy to it. Like we're saying, maybe that is part of it, or maybe that's where it starts off. I think some people are just
Mm-hmm.
not naturally built to develop
Okay.
strategies. So,
Uh, mhm.
they see a future. This can be like the hardest thing for a prophet, right? Where it's like
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
this sense and you see this future, but then most of the prophets in my life are a little messy when they talk, and you just have to give them
Mm.
space to be that way, and not to like
Mm-hmm.
organize it all
Mm-hmm.
right then. But sometimes
Yeah.
you have these prophetic big ideas for what the
Mm.
church should be, but then we don't have a foundation. I think that analogy, honestly, Dan, I might have gotten it from
That's good.
you, this analogy, but like the analogy that I always go back to in coaching is like, it's the trellis and the vine kind of
Hmm.
analogy, right? And it's this idea
Hmm.
that like organic things need structure to
Yeah.
grow. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the people listening are, engaged in like rule of life, kind of exercises, writing a rule of life, creating a
Hmm.
rule of life. I want to just say really quickly, I took like 9 years of Latin, and the first time I ever used Latin was preparing for this actual webinar. So don't make your kids take Latin. I almost have a minor in Latin, and it's been more or less useless in my life. But there's one thing I did learn: that the word for rule of life, we all know this, regula vita, right? This is the Latin word. The word regula is just, it means board, like stick. So the regula
Hmm.
vita, the rule of life, it's the stick of life, right? It's the board
Oh.
of life. And and so and the idea is like life thrives on a trellis, on a structure is where we thrive, and
Hmm.
we can read all kinds of different authors that have written about this, of saying that like the rule of life is not constraint. It is structure for thriving. And so
Right.
if you and I were going to start a vineyard together, we would trellis our vines because that's how they thrive.
Right.
Otherwise, they just die
Yeah.
on the ground. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lack of structure and a lot of really heartfelt vision and
Yes.
a prophetic disturbance of how the church should be. But those vines are
Mm.
dying on the ground because they're not willing to build any structural elements around
Mm.
it, right? Um,
Well,
any
yeah.
kind of trellis around it. And I just want to say, like, I think what's the irony of it is that when we want to be organic, but we have websites and email addresses and bank accounts and debit cards, and it
Hmm.
it to me it's like, if you don't build all that out appropriately, you're going to end up in so much trouble. And to say
Mm.
that you want to be
Mm.
completely organic, that makes me think like, just, I don't know, like text a bunch of friends and meet in a park and just kind of meet whenever. And yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think many church planners really, I don't know what they mean by organic, honestly. Sometimes I feel
Yeah.
like it just means half baked is what it means, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that might be too harsh. I
That
don't know.
that
Maybe.
that's yeah. That that imagination around something dying on the ground because it doesn't have a trellis is really compelling, and that's I think that's where the tension is how do you bring something life
Mm,
um, intentionally without controlling it, and that's the tension that you're speaking to. Let's talk a little bit about the early importance and maybe even some of the mechanics of. Oh, actually, before I ask you this question, if those who are on right now, if you have any, we're going to do some Q&A at the end of this. If you have some questions or a question, throw it in the Q&A section of this webinar, and we'll see if we can get to it. We'd love to drill Scott with some
mm,
some stuff. Um, so let's talk about leadership. So early on in a church plant, even the life of a church plant, that when it becomes a sustainable church, the the necessity of structuring leadership, but also the mechanics of structuring around leadership. Let's talk about that a little bit. There's so much. There is a lot of tenderness and even triggering around leadership, just because of leadership has been um, we're just seeing so many leaders falling and misusing their power,
mm,
that a lot of leadership 101 stuff of like developing leaders looks like it's just creating an on ramp for that eventual abuse.
yeah.
It doesn't seem to be sabotaging that. But so what's the alternative? Like, how do we start to help structure leadership? Is that a broad question? Can you poke at that, Scott?
Yeah. No. I could poke at that for weeks.
Okay.
Um, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is that the essential structural component for a new church plant has to be a family and it has to be a meal. Those are the two, I
Okay.
think, essential structural concepts early on, a family and a
Hmm.
meal. Um, so oftentimes the sort of church plant mechanisms that we grew up with, they they want a leader who an apostolic leader, but like really like a clear communicator is what really like preacher um
Yeah.
with a vision. Um
Hmm.
that's not a good way to host a dinner party. Um
No.
and so um I think if we step back and we start thinking about church planting as forming family, found family, New Testament family, if it's gathering,
Mm.
um, and we're doing it and we're thinking about it as a meal, I think what
Mm.
happens, if that's your perspective, this is at least my story, so maybe this isn't applicable. Before we started officially, I was telling a story of a my best friend who planted with me and is still working with me today. And we've raised our families together. His sons are my nephews in my heart. My sons are his nephews. And I mean, I get choked up thinking about it, but like what what's happened over the years with us is that because I think we started with this concept of church as family and a meal, is that we've constantly wanted to lean into um, we say people over product and people
Mm.
over process. So, and I know I'm like here to be the structure guy, but I think structure flows from loving people really well and considering them to be your family, um,
Mm.
and to try to set a table for people. And if we kind of
Yeah.
reimagine the church plant as setting a table and a dinner party and being hospitable, I even think
Hmm.
structure flows out of that because like who wants to go to a dinner party that has like no structure to it? I mean, I think about what was it, the Office
Yeah.
episode where they showed up for dinner and she had just put some kind of roast on that was going to take like 7 hours and they showed up and it was like 6 p.m. You know, it's
Yeah.
like I mean, so it, like we came up with this thing
Yeah.
early on, like we want to create space for people to grow in passion for God, compassion for one another, and wisdom. And for us, this creating spaces has been like a huge thing for
Mm.
us. It's like we're trying to be hospitable and create space. And so that's I think like the early
That's good.
foundational leadership calling for church planting, it needs to be family. And I'm going to invite
Yeah.
this family to a meal. Um,
Yes.
and then I mean, we can like get into polycentric leadership and all these other things, which we
Hmm.
practice that. I think that for me, the only other element I would add in the earliest days with regards to leadership is like
Mm.
slow down. You cannot, I don't think you can plant a healthy church quickly. Um,
Right.
I think it takes a long time. I always joke with people, I'm an
Hmm.
Enneagram 8, I'm an ENTJ, I'm a apostolic leader. Like I'm problematic in a number of categories. And but but I always joke with people when they ask about our church, and I'm like, yeah, the problem with our church is it's painfully slow for me because we submit
Mm.
everything to everybody. And it's just like we're just
Hmm.
constantly making sure we're all on the same page.
Mm.
Our elders don't say yes unless everyone agrees. There's no voting. I mean, we
Hmm.
vote officially because we're like a nonprofit, but we go
Yeah.
100% in or we're not doing it. So polycentric leadership, healthy leadership, setting a
Yeah.
good goal means you got to slow down.
Yeah.
This thing is not going to happen overnight.
That's great. So the that you're connecting the table and making space to the early days of structuring leadership. Are you saying that that space, that making space, that centering the table, meal, family, has multiple aspects of leadership that have to happen there, not just from one person?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I mean, I'm using a meal in like a literal and a metaphorical way. So, I
Yeah,
mean, in our church community, like we take communion every Sunday together. So we consider
sure.
that a meal together. So I'm not necessarily saying, I do think you should be having a lot of meals together, actual meals,
Yeah,
but it's more the concept of setting a table, even if that
yes,
table looks more like conference style seating, but the heart behind it is still like setting a table, is kind of
yeah,
where my head's at. But yes, it takes a polycentric leadership and it takes the fivefold leadership model to make sure there is um, somebody that's always welcoming. You do need to have a
yeah.
future vision person, and you need to help people
Hmm.
own those things early on. So, and as a team, celebrate them. So, in our community, I'm the vision guy, like I'm the catalyst guy. Everybody knows that's me. But one of my
Hmm.
teammates, Nancy, who's our community pastor, Nancy just desperately wants everyone to feel welcome. And so
Hmm.
she's so good at welcoming and loving people really well. Um, you know,
Mm.
our like she's our director of finance and operations, but she's so much more than that. She planted with us. She's a Enneagram 9 and she's a peacemaker. And she just like she wants people to be connected to each other in a way that's healthy. One of our
Yeah.
leaders is an evangelist at heart, and he hated that term at
Hmm.
first because he couldn't get it away from evangelical, which he didn't identify with,
Hmm.
but he realized like he wants people to hear the story of God, and he wants to hear it
Yeah.
in a safe and healthy way. And so,
Mm.
yeah, so I think
Mm.
like setting a table does
Great.
require um, a whole set of leadership, but it's good early on. This is why I think in
Yeah.
like year one of V3, it's like get those fivefold things figured out, because like
Yeah.
year one, you want to celebrate each other's like theogenetic coding and be like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's okay for me to be like a loud uh, entrepreneurial visionary, but I do so in submission to my peacemakers and my prophets and and I don't think any one of us sees
It's
us
good.
as like higher than the other. We
Yeah.
just function differently inside of this community that we consider to be our family.
Love it, Scott. That's good. In the last quarter of our book, Church's Movement, we look at that intentional structure that happens around the table from the vantage point of the fivefold, that there needs to be someone that cares about creating a welcoming environment, that's
Yep,
someone that cares about creating a teaching environment,
yep,
that someone creates a daring environment, that's the
mhm,
apostle, that
yeah,
someone creates a contending environment, that's contending for justice, uh, and then a good news environment. So you actually start structuring how we are together, uh, even at the table, even in our space making environments.
mhm,
What often you can actually, this happens unintentionally, and I've seen this in my last 15 years of coaching planters, but some planters start taking up the whole fivefold within themselves. They try to
mhm.
be all five of those functions, which ends up silencing other people's gifts and eventually leads to resentment because you really cannot be that long term. But it also makes for an environment that's not really it's not a trellis environment. It's actually not creating a space for flourishing. And so, just a suggestion to those who are listening, if you want to look at those five environments, it's a
Yeah,
helpful
Dan, I mean, I'd love to add to
piece.
that. Like
Yeah.
the other problem, I have another thought about a problem,
Okay.
that I have a maybe why that happened in the church. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
another problem with what you're saying is that when your church elevates one single um gift of the fivefold, you also
Yeah.
communicate to your community there's only one way of leading here. And so
Yes.
you
Yes.
immediately silence every other type because
Yeah.
you're not showing all of those types. And so even
Yes.
like, in our community we do team teaching. So like there's four of us and we are, we have a prophet as one of our preachers, an evangelist as one of our preachers. So we're always wanting to
Hmm.
like elevate all of those
Good.
things so that people can find themselves in that of like, oh, this is how a shepherd can lead in this community. Um, and then I think this will resonate with you, but I have a theory on like where this is coming from. And I think it's youth ministry. I think
Okay.
when we were all 20 somethings youth pastors, and I think there's a lot of church planters that were probably like 20 somethings
Yeah.
youth pastors.
Yeah. We have some data around that.
Okay.
About 68% of
Okay.
planters had previous youth ministry experience was their. Yep.
Perfect. The data's lining up. So when you're a youth
Yep.
pastor, you're like cash strapped and you do have to do everything because you have no money. So you are the
Mm.
preacher, the worship leader, the greeter, the kid discipler, the van driver, the dinner buyer, the meeting attender. You have to pretend to be
Yeah.
cool to 12 and 13-year-olds, and you have to sit in board meetings with 40 and 50-year-olds. You have to be a chameleon. You have to make everything
Yeah.
happen, and you have to do it with like no money and often very little praise. In fact, most of the time
Yeah.
your meetings are about something that was broken. And so most meetings you get called to, it's like you spent too much money or you broke something. So I think a lot of
Yeah.
us carry that spirit of being like
Yeah.
a ministry Swiss Army knife into church plant.
Yeah.
And instead of slowing
Yeah. Yeah.
down and building a healthy community of a family, we were like, I'm going to push and rush and I can do everything just good enough to get by. And we've kept that rhythm going, which is why so many church pastors are burnt out because some were
Right.
really high capacity Swiss Army knives and they could
Yeah.
do like a lot of things really well, but even that always has an end to it. It has a burnout
Yeah.
into it, and it's not
Yeah.
discipleship. It's not discipling others.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my theory. Maybe we could work on some paper on youth
That's
pastors gone
good.
wrong or something.
Yes. Let me ask you another question. I don't know. Am I on the screen still?
You are, but you're
Something I
there
meant.
you are. Yeah.
Um, a good resource for people to check out. Sometimes that word family triggers people because they've been in toxic family
Yes.
systems,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
large church pastors have communicated this as the family when really it's more of an audience. There's some tenderness there for people, and I get it. A great resource. It's old now. I think it's like 25 years old. Is by Joseph Hellerman. When the Church Was Family. It's primarily a theological book, but it's really not just approaching family. It's like how to create familial environments, relational environments that are genuinely caring about the one anotherness of each other and the other across the table. And so, and why we struggle with familial environments and find a lot of like hiding in more spectator environments. And so what you're speaking to, Scott, is like structure around that ethos, that value of a familial environment. And so just a helpful resource if someone wants to look
Just
at that and
let me
maybe.
interrupt real quick, Dan. I want to tell you Joseph
Yeah.
Hellerman's story. I'm
Oh,
finishing my dissertation right now, and a core element of my dissertation is family systems theory and exploring family
yeah.
systems theory and exploring like
Yeah.
historical abuse and things like that. So Hellerman's been
Yeah.
incredibly important to my research. And I reached
Yeah.
out to him to ask if he would be my doctoral advisor. And he sent me this
Oh,
very
wow.
kind, sweet email. And he said, Scott, blessings in your work. I'm officially retired from the academic world. I'm focused now completely on playing live jazz piano. And I thought, shouldn't it be with all of us? What a
Yes.
wonderful,
Beautiful.
what a wonderful retirement plan. But I also wanted to drop, I don't know if you've read Emily McGowan or Amy Peeler. They're
Mm,
both professors at Wheaton, but they are also active in the space. And they've got a book called
mm,
Households of Faith, which has also been a really important one. So,
mm.
but I do acknowledge the
Good.
family, you know, like, yeah, like in our church, one of our core values we used to say was submission. We now say it's like mutual submission, you know, or
Yeah.
mutuality. 'Cause I
Yeah.
do know there's some of those
Yeah.
terms, and I want to be really sensitive to
Yeah.
those things as well.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. The irony is that the more familial you structure your church around, the more the family systems theory, the more toxicity and our triggers and our roles gets pushed to the surface. It's really easy for those things to actually get hidden in a spectator environment. And so I tell everybody, if you want to create a healthy community, you're going to have to wrestle with toxic family systems.
Yeah.
Um, it's going to, it is going to come to the forefront of your um, need to grow competency there because it's the great reveal. Um, Anyhow, let's look at financial structure, Scott. This is within the missional, incarnational, micro church, organic church,
Mm.
fresh expressions,
Hmm.
you all the names out there, but really are just kind of church outside, kind of on the edge or
Mm.
outside of institutions. And it's beautiful. There's all kinds of budding things happening for the last 15, 20 years.
Mm.
But the financial aspect is one of the hardest and most embarrassing aspects for
Mm.
those churches. As in financially not considering finances, not knowing how to approach finances, not structuring around finance. It's just the last thing anybody wants to look at. So let's explore a little bit like what you see as structure financially, especially in early stages of community formation. What things need to be in place? What are some hurdles that you see? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think that, you know, a couple of like big ideas. One is I actually believe financial stewardship is spiritual stewardship. I do not separate. I can't separate those things out in my head or my heart. I think that in order
Say
to
that again, the first part.
financial stewardship is the same thing as spiritual stewardship. Like they're
Okay.
aligned. Like stewarding the finances of your community is a part of um your spiritual stewardship over your community. I think that my wife is a pediatrician, and I think two things that are common amongst doctors and pastors is nobody trains either on how to run a business. Um, it's
Yeah.
just not either you grew up like I grew up with an entrepreneurial father who started and ran a successful company. So I grew up sort of next to that
Mhm.
business entrepreneur type. And so which has been great. For me, and I think at times helpful for my wife sometimes when we get in, you know, when I'm invited into the space that she's in. But she's a partner in a medical practice and has been like learning. So I think it's important early on to acknowledge your weaknesses and find the right people to come around you, um,
Okay.
and to support you early on. Um, I This is one of the core reasons we started 412 Project was because we wanted to do bookkeeping services, um, for ministries and nonprofits, and it's been wild. What we've seen is that financial stability leads to freedom organizationally. So if we go
Mm.
back to the organic idea, if we want to be really organic and just meet in a park and whoever shows up whenever you want to meet, and you have no bills and there's no liturgy, it's just we just get together and And I've been to churches like that in Africa, and they're kind of amazing. I don't know if they work in our North American context that I'm in. Some of them maybe do. If you want to truly be organic, I guess there is a journey for that. And I've seen
Hmm.
people try to do that. But for the most part, like I said earlier, we're actually needing structures because there are things like we want people to give money to our church. If you ask somebody to give money to your organization, you have an absolute responsibility to steward that money well. And that means
Hmm.
strong bookkeeping principles. So what we've learned as we've like started becoming a bookkeeper for more and more organizations, what we've learned is that we are able to speak so much life into the organization just by helping them sort out their back end and be like,
Mm.
yeah, you can't make that payment like that, or you need to do this, or this is or you're spending more money than is coming in, or things like that. So
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
that that's a key thing. I would also highly encourage pastors to avoid debt at all possibility. Um,
Mm.
I think I've seen this is in the megachurch world. I think this is something we don't talk about enough. Is that
Oh,
debt
yep.
drives decisions in megachurches because they're
Mm.
$20 million under because they built a whatever, and the debt to
Yeah.
asset ratios are strong, but like cash flow is brutal. Um,
Mm.
anyway, so I definitely think real bookkeeping from day one. There are organizations that can help with that, but you also have people probably around you in your communities that have that core competency. Um,
Yes.
but I think knowing what you have in the bank, how it's structured. I want to say just like maybe one more thing and then we can get more into it. But like, if you have an intent of paying rent or paying people, you have
Mm.
you have to see those as like contractual, um and you have to be organized to do that well.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair to ask people to take a wage from your church and then be on and off as to whether you can pay it. I don't think it's fair to sign a rental
Hmm.
contract and then bail on it. I don't think it's a
Hmm.
good witness to a
Yeah.
healthy community or to a city. And so there are some elements early on where it's like take the money
Yes.
seriously. Um, I'm a co-vocational pastor. Everybody on our team is co-vocational. That's been a huge,
Hmm.
powerful thing for us because we've not ever
Hmm.
relied fully on the finances of the church. That was
Yeah.
part of our design early on. But yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, I was really grateful that the one of our team that planted the church with us he was an MBA that had become a pastor. And so, I mean, our books from day one look like, you know, they were amazing. And but that also
Yeah.
trained in us a long
Yeah.
term of like, oh, we're always going to be able to put out a financial report every month. We're always going to contact donors every year and tell them what they gave. We're always going to be 100% transparent with our finances and our books. Um,
Yeah.
so like those elements, because Dan, you talked about people being adverse to the term family.
Hmm.
I mean, if you want to dig into what people don't believe or trust about the church, money's got to be
Sure.
like the next thing
Yeah.
or maybe above that. And
Mm.
I just think it's
Yeah.
critical for us to steward finances in an open, transparent way and be orderly with how
Yes.
we're doing it.
Yes. That's great. Yeah. I'll testimony right now is your 412 project's support of the Caneo Center in our books has been just absolutely freeing using that language. It's been amazing to have
Mm,
such clarity and transparency and um, peace at like what actually is there.
mm,
Um, it's easy for finances to kind of be ambiguous and blurry.
mm,
Kind of have a sentimental understanding of your finances, and that doesn't work for building trust and for having freedom to make really bold and brave decisions. So thanks 412 for caring for us, and big advocate. I wish when I planted 16 years ago that I had taken our books more seriously. I don't have that competency. And so the acknowledgement of weakness, not as a threat to my ego, but as a reality that I actually need support and I need to draw people into leadership there, um, didn't happen early on for us. So thanks for giving us freedom to admit we're weak someplace and we don't need to be strong in that area. Let's talk a little bit about ecclesiological structure. That's a big word, but how there's there the what you structure around early on is going to have a significant impact in who you are um, as you grow up. If you think about this in terms of stages of development, um, childhood development, adolescence, college, like you're growing in. I know that most planters, um, outside of institutional and traditional structures of just the public gathering and small groups, when they move into like missional, incarnational, all those things I talked about earlier, ecclesiological structure gets really blurry. They don't know what to structure, what not to structure. Should I structure? What is an ecclesiological structure that exists outside the institution or the edge of an institution? Let's talk a little bit about ecclesiological structure.
Yeah, it seems like if we're saying structure, ecclesiological
Yeah.
structure, it almost needs to follow um, your missiology, I think.
Okay.
So I think the ecclesia, joins God's mission, but then I think the church structure, the organizational structures probably need to flow
Mm-hmm.
from like a clear understanding of the mission of what you're called to do in a place and a time. So
Yeah.
there's not like a one size fits all. This is why coaching
Mhm.
is like absolutely essential for church planters. And I would,
Yeah.
to the best of your ability, find a coach that does not have an ecclesial bias, um,
Mm-hmm.
that can really step back and like imagine the context that you're in and how that might look and what a church community may look like thriving in that context. So your
Yeah.
mission, I think, is like number one. But then um, we we've called ourselves for a long time like a community of communities. I think would be we would call our is would be a part of our ecclesiological structure. So what that means for us is Sunday is not the center. Sunday
Mm-hmm.
gathering is not the center, but it's the celebration of what's been happening all week in homes and coffee
Mm-hmm.
shops and around tables and things like that. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that sounds like maybe like a reworking of like small groups, but in my mind, so often the historical small group structure is meant to kind of bulwark the Sunday gathering. It's sort of like
I
a
see. Yeah.
retention strategy, not like a sending
Mm-hmm.
strategy, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
so um, the I don't know. I listened to a church planning coach a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, and he said you need to know everything about your church plant before you plant it. And I was actually on a panel
Mm.
with him, and I'm like sitting up there, and I hear him say that, and I think to myself like, we would have failed miserably at that. I I actually
Mm.
I think our ecclesial structure has been fueled by our polycentric commitment to one another as a community. So like
Okay.
the structures have come out of our passion and heart for what we're doing in our neighborhood, and in
Mm.
our context. So structures are easy to like. It's easy to find different ways of structuring things. It's kind of like if you like want to bake sourdough bread, you can find like a lot of different attacks on
Mm.
sourdough bread, and
Hmm.
hopefully all of them
Hmm.
land you something delicious. So I think you can pull from a lot of different ecclesial structural things historically in the church, but the commitment to one another as a community and to the mission that God has called you to precedes any of those things. And then you start pulling
Yes.
in, for us, it's been, we decided early on that we have a board of directors for our church, which sounds a little strange maybe, but we are a legal 501c3 entity in the state of Texas, which means we have legal requirements on us as to what we have to do to satisfy our ability
Hmm.
to give people, they don't pay taxes when they donate to our church. There's all these things you
Yeah.
have to do.
Yeah.
There's legal things.
Yeah.
And then what we've done is we've created what we call a community of elders. So,
Hmm.
and that community of
Mm.
elders is much larger than our board of directors. So our
Mm.
board members serve for 2 to 3 years. Our community of elders serve our community as elders for life. And
Mm.
we like to use a term. I got this from a guy who's discipled me for years, Billy. We use a term in our community of eldering. Like we want to create
Hmm.
a community of elders, and we call people to
Yep.
serve in different capacities. So early on, like
Yeah.
separating the board of elders, separating those two terms out and having, when
Yeah.
I meet with the board of directors, my joke with them is like, you guys are here to make sure I don't go to jail. And they are like men and women of integrity,
Hmm.
they love Jesus, but they are like, it's an attorney, it's a CPA, it's a business entrepreneur. Um, when I talk
Hmm.
about our elders, I talk about like the people you just know when you see an elder. Like they're just
Yeah.
eldering, you know? And so I
Yeah.
wanted to
Yeah.
separate out the spiritual
Yeah.
um, leaders in our community from people that might be helpful in running like a nonprofit.
Okay.
And to
Yeah.
not have those, I don't think merging them is a good idea early on. And I mean,
Right.
I know we don't have a ton of time to get into it, so maybe some other time. But we basically have a leadership community, is what we call it. We have a board,
Yep.
we have a staff team, and then we have a kind of like a deacon team. We call it our core team. But we look at that
Yeah.
as our polycentric leadership community, where we want to submit our ideas to each person in that community, hear their
Mm.
feedback, and try to only move when we feel like we're all on the same page. And
Yeah.
so, again, I'd say, man, the biggest thing here is slow down. You have to slow
Okay.
down to build these systems. Okay.
Yes.
I heard if your first year of church planning, you've already named like 6 elders.
You're right.
How
Yeah.
on earth would you do that? You've not
Yeah.
seen these people
Yeah.
through seasons of life. You've not done life with these. So it's just, you've got to
Yeah.
slow down. I'd rather have a nonprofit board for the first year than have people I gave the term elder to in my community.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think speed is one of the things that can betray so much of good structure.
Scott, do you have development mechanisms? Do you have pathways to help pull people into those environments or get them ready for that environment? Or like, or because you said you know an elder when you see an elder, is that the primary mode, or is there also some?
Yeah. I mean, you're talking to the structure guy. I mean, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Our discipleship pathway, we have a year one cohort that we lead people it's called Becoming a Biblical Elder. And
Mm.
it's a once a month in the morning thing that we train people
Mm.
through our core values and our mission and vision. And then our second
Yes.
year moves to an evening gathering. And our third
Mm-hmm.
year moves to like a retreat based gathering. So we try to keep
Oh, wow.
tuning up the intensity of it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and our goal though is to take everyone in our community through that, not just,
Sure.
we would love to have a community of elders that function in
Yes.
different ways all throughout the community. So yeah, I mean, but I do think there are people that sometimes you sit with somebody for a minute and you're like, I don't need to give you a title of elder. Like you are clearly an elder. And so I want to honor and recognize that in our community as well. But yeah, training pathways I think they're essential.
A great resource. Still keep throwing resources out there, but there's a
Yeah.
book called Elders in the Mission of God.
Mm.
I think I can't remember who wrote it. It's a great book.
Mm.
But it's really eldering that's oriented around engaging in mission rather than in status or personality. Um, so a great resource that's helpful. The in ecclesiology that has there was a question. I think we got a couple minutes left. I just want to someone asked like, where do you find a coach?
Oh, 412project.org. So, or the V3 movement has, I mean, they have
Yeah,
awesome coaches there
yeah,
as well. Those are two trusted
yeah,
places I would start with, for sure.
yeah,
And if the kind of coach you need, like through our site 412 project, there's like a little intake thing and there's like a 30-minute meeting. And,
yeah,
if we're not the right coach, we
yeah,
can generally help people find the right coach. And so, but I mean,
yeah,
V3 has, coaching available as
yeah,
well. Those are two good places to start.
yeah,
But I mean,
yeah.
Dan and I could probably both, if somebody wants to reach out to us, we can probably help if there's with the
Hmm.
right kind of coaches, depending on the context.
Yeah,
I was going
you
to
got
say
it.
too, I think if you're feeling pain as a leader, if you're feeling pain as a leader, I would just invite you to examine structure as one of the maybe reasons for it.
Mm,
Um,
okay, keep going on that. What do you?
well, with my sons, and they don't like it when I say this, but I say that your system is perfectly designed to yield the results that you're getting.
Okay.
So if you're getting burnout, you've designed a system to burn you out. Um,
Mm,
I say it with their grades. If you get bad grades, you designed a studying system to give you bad grades. We need to redo the system. So we have to rethink the
okay.
structure. We have to we have to form the trellis. Otherwise, we're going to
Yeah,
keep getting the same results over and over and over again. So the
yeah,
system generally is what's yielding the season that you're in.
yeah, yes, yeah. We got one last question. We got 2 minutes here, but someone asked when can you build a pathway
Mm.
for eldering? When do you start that discipleship pathway? Is that later? Is that earlier?
I
Maybe
would
even a
make
little
it
bit what it looks like.
I would make it a core formation to your church. That's like literally
Yeah.
how I would start a church plant is I would start with a
Yep.
community of
Yep.
people that you had a heart to become elders. And not everybody's going to be on
Yes.
the same pathway for that, or the same
Yep.
timeline for that. I wouldn't call anyone an elder early on, but I would start with like
Yeah.
month 1 and I would start laying
Yep.
out what it looks like to grow into the
Yes.
fullness. I mean, we use Ephesians 4 for so much grow into
Yeah.
maturity and the unity of the body. And so I would start right away with a
Yes.
vision for people, and then
Yes.
start moving them in that direction as your church is growing in breadth. You'll start adding people to
Yeah.
that community.
Absolutely. Yeah. We use a language of a discipleship pathway that the outcome or the
Yep.
goal is that it's producing elder quality people.
Yep.
Some people they don't make that journey. And it's not the only space that you're working on, but from day one, it needs to be one of the primary trellises that you put at the very center, the nucleus
Yes.
of your church. I find that a lot of leaders do that later
Mm-hmm.
when they have leadership scarcity, like suddenly they realize they're not surrounded by mature Christians, and it's often a little bit too late at that point. So very important to start that now and even get that into the ecosystem because you're going to just keep cycling. You're going to keep working that for the rest of your church plant life, even at year 16. But it needs to be part of the ecosystem. So thanks, Scott. Good stuff. We could go all day. Love your metaphors. Thanks for sharing your story. If you are curious about structure and strategy that comes from the vantage point of family and belonging and hospitality, 412 Project is a great resource. Look at them and the V3 movement as well. I'd love to have you. We have right now an immersion, just a short, I think it's a short short immersion, 6 weeks. That's really around creating emotionally healthy discipleship pathways in your church. So if you're curious about that, check out the v3movement.org. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for chiming in. And everybody will get an email of this recorded webinar as a further resource in your planting. Peace out.
Thanks, Dan.